Hello and welcome to your bridging lesson. We're going to be looking at carbohydrates. Okay, so this is a bit of biochemistry. First of all, let's just have a look at the function. Okay, so why do we need to look at carbohydrates? What functions do they have? So we have to start with that they're obviously to do with energy, as you know. So they can be immediate energy source, they can be a store of energy, alright, they can be used in transport, both in plants and animals, okay, so to be transported from one place to another. They can also be structural, okay, so examples of these would be cellulose in cell wall, DNA and RNA have sugars that make them up, okay, important molecules in biology in the cell membrane, okay. So actually this topic of carbohydrates is really important from a biological point of view because it underpins quite a lot of biological functions. Okay, right. What we'll look at is some basic what carbohydrates are. So from GCSE, you know carbohydrates are made up of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. The general equation for any carbohydrate is CH2ON. Okay. Now you can get carbohydrates where N is 3, where N is 5, where N is 6. So where you have 3 carbons, we have what we call a triose sugar. Okay. So if we put the 3 into our formula there, we would have a chemical formula of C3H6O3. Okay. Our 5 carbon sugars are pentose sugars. Okay. And these would obviously be C5H10O5. And our 6 carbon sugars are hexose sugars. And this one you should automatically remember from your GCSE. Okay, you'll recognise that one. So let's have a look at some categories, okay, of carbohydrates. So there are a few categories, okay. Alright, so the first one we'll deal with, alright, are the monosaccharides. Okay, these are basic sugars. They're single units of carbon compounds. So discrete carbon compounds, carbohydrates that is, are called monomers. Okay, so each molecule of a discrete carbon compound is called a monomer. Now, in the monosaccharides, okay, it's just made up, okay, of monomers on their own. These are simple sugars, okay. And there's where that word saccharide comes from. There's something saccharine, it's very sweet, isn't it? And that's a similar thing. So there's where the saccharide comes in. Now, the ones that you need to know, the ones that are important for your GCSE, and there's lots of them here, they are, now this is where it gets slightly tricky, alpha glucose, fructose, and galactose. Now, later on we'll talk about the structure of these, but those are the 3 you need to know about. When you get to the second unit that you do for your A-level, Unit 2, you will do beta glucose. So that is coming eventually, but we'll concentrate on these 3 to start with. Okay. Of course, we've then got, so we've got our monosaccharides. We've also got our disaccharides. Okay. Now the disaccharides are basically made up of two monomers joined together. So these can join together to form a disaccharide, and that's where the term di comes, meaning two. So it's two monomers bonded together. Alright? Now for your specification, the ones that you need to know about in this case are maltose. And you'll remember maltose from GCSE in your digestion, okay? Maltose, and you'll be able to work out what those monomers that make that are if you remember your digestion, okay? Maltose, sucrose, and lactose. All right. Now, we do actually have our third category, okay, which are the polysaccharides. And I'm not going to cover you don't need to know about this in this sort of bridging lesson, but these are chains of monomers, and you will eventually do that when you come back to school. That'd be something to look forward to. And polysaccharides are often can often be associated with structural function, and they will be cellulose. They also store of energy, glycogen, you know that from GCSE, and starch in plants. Okay, a little bit more basic chemistry before we move on to some nitty-gritties of actually what's going on with these things. So let's get rid of our functions here. We can get rid of the polysaccharides because we don't want those. Okay, so a bit of carbon chemistry, okay. All right. It can bond. It can make 4 bonds, a valency of 4, so it can make strong covalent bonds. Okay. Now, depending on what your structure is, it can be a chain molecule where the carbons form chains like this. Okay, and they will have their bonds elsewhere. Or they can form rings. All right. We've mentioned that a discrete carbon compound is called a monomer. Okay. And if we have a look at this bonding, we often do 2-dimensional pictures to represent our molecules here. But it's good to bear in mind how a carbon atom will bond. And if this was our carbon atom here, it can make 2 bonds that are within the plane of the board. So if you imagine these are in the plane of the board, then it would make one that sticks out the back of the board, so going in the back direction, and there would be one bond that comes out the front like this. So it's good to bear in mind that there is a 3-dimensional structure. I can show this with a little model here. We've got, this is the carbon atom here. These little grey sticks, you've all worked with molymods before, represents the bonds that are possible. So there's 2 that are in the plane of the board. But you also have a bond that would come out the front of the board, like so, and then you'd have a bond that sticks into the back of the board, and I have to lift that up slightly so that it's sticking backwards. So bear in mind that it has this sort of 3D shape. Okay.